Okay, so Hugh set me up nicely by introducing BOSS. So as he mentioned, I'm going to be talking about how we use polarimetric radar data to constrain BOSS. And so the three variables I'm going to be talking about are reflectivity, or ZH, which is basically the power return to the radar when emitted radiation is scattered by hydrometeors, and ZH goes as the drop diameter to the sixth power. I'll be talking about differential reflectivity, or DDR, which gives us a measure of the mean hydrometeor shape, and then specific differential phase, or KDP, which measures the concentration of non-spherical raindrops within an observed volume. So if we think about these different variables and how they evolve with height for different warm rain processes, we can expect them to behave a bit differently. So for example, for coalescence, as we move towards larger drops with height as coalescence occurs, we would expect to see an increase in ZH, ZDR, and KDP moving towards the ground. And then in contrast for breakup, as our drops become smaller, we would see a decrease in each of these variables. And then for evaporation, we would expect to see a decrease in ZH and KDP as droplets evaporate. But because small droplets evaporate first, we would actually see an increase in the mean hydrometeor size, which would lead to an increase in ZDR. So these combinations of observations can provide us microphysical fingerprints that we can use to teach our model about the processes acting on our raindrops. And so with this in mind, we constrain BOSS with profiles of ZH, ZDR, and KDP below cloud base, where currently we're using observations that are simulated from bin model simulations so that we can compare what BOSS produces back to some sort of truth. And so the red lines here represent our observations of ZH, ZDR, and KDP. And then we're also constraining with moment fluxes at the surface of our prognostic DSD moments. So here I'll be prognosing with the third and sixth moments of the drop size distribution. So we have our observations and our initial conditions from our bin simulations. And so our goal now is to estimate what the parameters of our BOSS microphysics scheme should be. And so to do this, as Hugh mentioned before, we use Markov chain Monte Carlo, or MCMC, which if you think about, let's say we're just trying to retrieve two parameters, this algorithm allows us to jump around in our 2D parameter space and make guesses as to what those parameters are. So in our framework, we would run our BOSS model with that guess at those parameters, use a forward operator to convert what BOSS produces back to our observations, and then compare them and compute the likelihood of that solution. And so we can do this iteratively so that as we continually make guesses, we hone in on a high probability region that then gives us a nice parameter distribution of our different estimates. So in this case, we're actually trying to retrieve 12 parameters. And as we do this, we're constantly comparing what BOSS produces back to observations, where what our observations are using this framework are represented by these black lines. And as we use this MCMC process, eventually we end up with a nice distribution of potential solutions. And then we can also make a best guess estimate, as is represented by this yellow line here. So our goal is to figure out what the optimal BOSS parameter values are, to figure out the uncertainty of these parameters. And then because our BOSS model evolves moments of the DSD, we can extract process rate information from this framework. And so here I'm showing the results from that case I showed on the previous slide, where M3 evap just represents the evolution of the third moment of the DSD, or M3, due to evaporation. So that's the same sort of nomenclature I'm going to be using. So this is the evolution of M6 due to evaporation, due to coalescence, breakup, and then this is the mass-weighted fall speed and the ZH-weighted fall speed. So in general, these black lines represent our parameter estimates and what they produce using the BOSS model. And then the red lines are the truth from our bin simulations. So in general, we're matching the bin simulations pretty well. So when we constrain BOSS, we don't just use one set of observations. Right now, let's say we're using 40 constraining observations. So we need to have a way to diagnose the model error. So I'm going to be showing a bunch of heat map plots like this. And the way these are broken down is that if we take this one profile, as I showed previously, we can compute the error between the truth in red and then our BOSS estimates in black at each height within the model. And then we can combine those error estimates for all 40 of our constraining simulations and basically combine them to create giant PDFs at each height, where the PDF within this heat map is represented by the color. So for example, for ZH at the top of the column here, we have really bright colors centered on 0. So this suggests we have a very constrained PDF centered at 0. And then as you move towards the bottom of the column, we get a bit more spread. So this suggests that there is variance in the error produced by BOSS based on the different simulations that we're using to constrain BOSS. So the big thing though I want to point out here is that these pink vertical lines represent our assumed observation error. So if we're keeping our BOSS error in between these two pink lines, we're doing a really good job of matching observations. And so you'll notice that for ZH, CDR, and KDP, we're staying within those lines pretty well as for the fluxes of M3 and M6 at the surface. So in general, BOSS is doing a good job of matching observations, suggesting that our model error isn't too bad. So what we're really after though is getting this process level information. And so here I've plotted the same sort of framework, but now we're comparing what BOSS produces on a process level back to the bin simulations. And you'll notice that here, the majority of our PDFs throughout the height of the model is centered pretty close to 0 for a majority of these processes. We might see a slight negative bias, for example, with the sedimentation of M3, but in general, we're pretty close to 0. One thing I do want to note is that you'll notice that there's not quite as much of a peak in the PDFs for coalescence and breakup. Here, represented by the cooler colors and the larger spread in errors. And this suggests that we're not getting as good of constraint on coalescence and breakup here. So everything I've shown you thus far is done when we are trying to estimate our 12 parameters of our microphysics scheme. And so here I've plotted PDFs of those 12 parameters that we've retrieved, where we can think about this spread in the parameter PDFs as giving us a sense of the parametric uncertainty within our microphysics scheme. And when we sample from these parameter PDFs, we can get an estimate of our microphysical process rate uncertainty, like what I showed in the plots in the previous slide. But the question now that we should be asking is, well, is the solution that I just showed you universal? Or if we use a new set of 40 constraining observations, do we get a different set of parameter ranges? So we went ahead and tested this. So I'm going to loop forward. This is for constraining with a new set of 40 observations, and then once again for another set of 40 observations. So each PDF within these plots is one of those cases with a new set of observations. And the first thing I want to draw your attention to is for the M6 fall speed parameters, a majority of the PDFs for these 3 different tests do fall on top of each other, or at least ranging over the same parameter range. So this suggests we're getting good convergence in this parameter estimate and therefore good constraint on the individual process. But then if you look at the remaining parameters, there is a bit of a spread between all of them. For example, the M6 breakup parameters, there's not very good convergence. So this suggests we need to do something to better constrain these processes. So for example, here, these purple lines represent doubling the number of observations we use to constrain BOSS. So now I have 3 different cases where we constrain with 80 simulations plotted in purple. And the first thing I want to draw your attention to is all of the parameter PDFs in this purple box are the parameters related to M6. So where we double the number of constraining observations, now our PDFs are starting to converge and remain on top of each other, suggesting we're getting better constraint on these processes. But we want to make sure we're getting constraint about the proper solution, so we can compare the case where we used 40 constraining observations to 80 constraining observations and look at the errors of the process rates. You'll notice that for the sedimentation for M6, we don't see much of a change between 40 and 80 constraining simulations, but this makes sense because this was the one case for 40 constraining observations that was well behaved for that parameter. But then if we look at M6 evap, you'll notice that we do see a decrease in the error going from 40 to 80 constraining observations. So this does suggest that that increased parameter convergence is leading to better results. And then we start to see this for a lot of the other processes. For example, coalescence, you'll see that the PDF becomes a bit more peaked moving from 40 to 80 observations. So we're getting improved process constraint. And then one other thing I want to draw your attention to is at the top of the column, we have a bit of a positive bias for 40 constraining observations, but then as we go to 80, our peak in the PDF gets a bit closer to that 0 line. So we're getting improved representation at model top here. But then in contrast, our M3 parameters are still not converging to a common parameter range. And if we look at the process rate errors between these two cases, we're not seeing much of an improvement. So this suggests that there might be some source of structural error within our model. So one way using these Bayesian methods that we can get after where the structural error is stemming from is we can look at the correlations between parameters. And so here I'm plotting the Pearson correlation coefficient between the A parameter for M3 evap and all the other parameters. And then again for the B parameter or the beta parameter for M3 evap and all the other parameters. And the thing that I really want to draw your attention to is the A and B parameters for both of these cases are positively correlated with the A and B parameters of M3 falls. So this means that our evaporation and sedimentation parameters are positively correlated here, which suggests that there is some sort of compensating error within the model. And we can think about this as being a case where maybe we see weak evaporation paired with small fall speeds, producing maybe a similar profile of DSD moments as a case with strong evaporation and fast fall speeds. So this here is telling us that we need additional observations to improve our constraint on evaporation and sedimentation, especially in the case for M3, because as we saw previously, our constraint on the M6 parameters is a bit improved. And this makes sense because polarimetric radar data provides information about the higher order moments, just like ZH is proportional with M6. So just to briefly summarize, we showed that BOSS produces similar results to a bin model when its parameters are directly constrained with radar observations and prognostic moment surface fluxes. We showed that increasing the number of constraining simulations leads to convergence in the M6 parameter ranges, and that this increase in constraining simulations did not really improve the M3 parameters quite as much. And we think this is due to this positive correlation between evaporation and sedimentations, which is telling us that we need more observational information to constrain these M3 processes. But I just want to say that, as Hugh mentioned, BOSS is flexible. And so some things that we've been working on that I didn't get to show today is that if we include more information, for example, M0 flux at the surface, let's say if we were prognosing with the 0th moment in addition to the 3rd and 6th moments, we can get improved constraint on our processes and reduced errors. And then we've also done some tests where we can selectively reduce the observations used to constrain the scheme. And this can also give us information about the content of these observations. So there's a lot of different things we can do with this flexible framework, but I'll end here and take any questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Carly. We have a couple of questions. One is, how many posterior samples do you have in your MCMC runs?
Sure. So the samples that when we run the MCMC algorithm, we run it out for 4 million iterations, but then we usually just take the latter 2 million to use our, to draw from for like what I'm showing here, because basically those first couple million we use as sort of a spin up to make sure we're getting to a probable region in the parameter space.
Then we have another question from Jeff Stair. Can you use this as a method to hunt for structural problems in the model? And could you automate that process?
So yes, I think that this is a good way to sort of hunt down structural error. That's sort of that idea of where when we weren't getting good convergence on our parameter estimates, that kind of suggests to us that there's some sort of structural error that we might need to improve upon our model. In terms of automating the process, I'm sure we could eventually, but at this point, just trying to get things to converge properly, you kind of have to use some sort of theoretical knowledge of what's going on within the model to really understand that link between what the MCMC is showing you versus sort of what's going on within the model itself.
And there's one question, I'm not sure if we have quite enough time for it, but if not, we can answer it later, which is how do we, I'm going to summarize this, how do we deal with those structural errors and keep from overfitting models that have structural errors?
That's a good question. In one of our papers that Hugh talked about, there is some discussion of over and underfitting the model. So I'm gonna, for the sake of time, refer you there. But I think structural error that's kind of the idea behind this, is that at least with this methodology, you can start to pinpoint the sources of the structural error. So for example, here we just need to increase our observations of some of the processes to improve upon that. So a lot of this framework is built so that we can continually add more of the information we gain from theory, which would help reduce structural error. And then also, as we get improved observations, you can include that as well. So it's really built to be flexible so that you can really try to improve that based off of your needs.